Welcome to In the Envelope, a podcast from Backstage, the #1 resource for actors and talent seekers. I am your host, Jack Smart, awards editor at Backstage, and I'm here to guide you through every aspect of the entertainment industry with the help of some of your favorite stars. These intimate, inspirational conversations with today's most award-worthy film, television, and theater artists provide you, dear listener, advice on how to live the creative life, personal stories of success and failure alike, and maybe, just maybe, a tantalizing glimpse in the envelope.
There are really rough times, for anything that's great, there are some low lows, but there are some high highs, And I think one of the big things is finding what balances you and grounds you.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of In the Envelope. It's Jack, your trusty host, awards editor at Backstage. I am so thrilled to present to you all this week Nicole Beharie, this wonderful conversation with the wonderful Nicole Beharie. Listen, as is quite obvious, moments into this interview, I had a lot of fun interviewing Nicole. She is a recent Gotham Award winner and Spirit Award nominee for her work in Miss Juneteenth, which is one of the most beautiful indie films I've seen recently. She plays the leading character of Turquoise Jones, who is a former beauty queen in the Miss Juneteenth pageant in Texas. This is a real pageant centered around the holiday of Juneteenth that awards scholarships to young Black women. Channing Godfrey Peoples, the writer-director of this film, she kind of based it on her personal experiences with the pageant. She watched that pageant growing up. And so Nicole was cast in this leading role. It's a character study about a single mom who enters her daughter in that same pageant. And Nicole's performance is hard to describe why it's good and how good it is. I mean, she just lives and breathes this character on the screen. And so that's why it was so cool to feature her on this podcast and to ask her specifically these backstage questions of how did you create this character? How do you generally approach characters? I really think this interview is a great example of I think it gets at the heart of the sometimes difficult to talk about aspects of being an actor. And that goes for both the craft process of creating your characters, but also the ebbs and flows of your career. Nicole might be best known as the lead in the network drama Sleepy Hollow, which, as we touched on, made her one of the only Black women in a network TV drama lead role. And a lot has changed since that show came out. So it was cool to ask her about the conversations that have happened in the mainstream since that show aired. And in keeping with that, stay tuned afterward for Christine McKenna-Torella's wonderful segment this week. She is kicking off Women's History Month for us. Happy Women's History Month this March, with a kind of look at the state of the industry in terms of female directors like Channing Godfrey Peoples. The Golden Globes for this past weekend, Backstage covered it. You can find that recap on our site. I would say that, there's lots to talk about with the Globes. I'm just going to mention one aspect that I've been thinking about with the Globes, which is that in their whole history, 78 years, only one woman had ever won the film directing prize before last night. Now it is 2. It used to be just Barbra Streisand was the only female director winner, and now Chloe Zhao has joined her as the second. What that says about the state of gender parity in the industry in general, and in particular with feature film directing, I will let you draw your own conclusions. But, in the history of the Oscars, they've also only honored one. The Golden Globes now has a track record that is now twice as good as the Oscars. So anyway, it's fitting that we featured Nicole, who's very outspoken, and that we're featuring this film, Miss Juneteenth, which is by a debut female director. It's a wonderful film. It's a wonderful reason why female directors need to be given more opportunities and need to be given more awards recognition than they have in the last 80 or 90 years, Hollywood. So in that spirit, let us get to this wonderful interview with Nicole, and do stick around for Christine. Let's take a quick break and get to it. This podcast is brought to you by Backstage, the world's #1 casting platform. Listen, A lot of the guests on In the Envelope, an awards podcast, used Backstage at the beginning of their careers. It's how they are now in the running for Emmy, for Oscar, for Tony, etc. If you are at the beginning of your career as an artist, here's what you do. You go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free 30-day trial. That's right, free 30-day trial if you go to backstage.com/subscribe and enter the code ENVELOPE. All you got to do then is make a profile, upload a headshot, and start applying to jobs, to the thousands of casting notices that are uploaded every day, which you can filter online to match your specific talents, your specific needs, your specific looks. Get that dream started today. Check out that free 30-day trial, backstage.com/subscribe, enter the code ENVELOPE. Let's do it. Nicole Beharie has given her all to the acting craft and followed her instincts in navigating an impressive career. The Juilliard graduate broke into Hollywood with the film American Violet, going on to lead the network drama Sleepy Hollow and appear in Shame, 42, Black Mirror, and last year, Channing Godfrey Peoples' indie film Miss Juneteenth, which earned her a Gotham Award and Spirit Award nomination for leading actress. Here is the dazzling Nicole Beharie. So you're on location. What are you doing?
None of your business.
Am I last?
No, I can't tell you.
Is that right? Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, but I'm in Georgia, and I like it here. Today it's been rainy, but today we got our first like really nice sunny kind of almost in the 60s day. So I'm happy today. Yeah.
You're based in New York?
I am, but
you have family in Georgia.
I do have people in Georgia and all over the South. And then I've spent some time in New York and in Los Angeles during the last year. But it's nice to be back in Georgia because I spent quite a bit of time here last year.
Congratulations on all your success. I am so excited to talk to you about Miss Juneteenth, which I loved so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your Gotham Award and all of your accolades for that.
Thank you.
So we are Backstage's podcast. We, as Backstage's podcast, we are, of course, obsessed with all things acting advice, craft, and career.
Yes. Okay.
Were you ever familiar with Backstage? Like, did you ever use Backstage for casting notices?
Not for casting notices, but I did read Backstage for just like specifically for the theater, for like what was going on.
Sure.
With, plays. Juilliard? Yeah. Cool. Afterwards, I was living in New York, working at like a boutique and all of just doing all the things you're supposed to be doing. But no, not for casting notices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not for casting notices, but I did use it sort of for like to know what's coming up and then to ask my agents, sort of like that, ask my agents if they could look into it.
We've heard that before. It's actually, it's just a good way to like keep track of what's going on so that you can hold your agent's feet to the fire.
Exactly. To be like, hey, I saw that this is happening. What's going on? Exactly. I never like went into any of the bigger calls that sort of happen. I think my like temperament is no good for that, but it's an amazing resource. And then even when I got out of school, we still had it online as well. So that was available. And the articles have just always been fantastic. Great. Yeah.
That's always so good to hear. And of course I would love to ask you about Juilliard. I mean, going back further though, what was the original dream? Like, were you bit by the acting bug at a young age?
I don't know I don't know that that's true. I think when I look back at it, my family and everyone is like, duh. But I thought I was gonna. I know it's like I have family in England, and they have videotapes of like me putting on plays with like enforcing my cousins, like, you stand there, I'm gonna sing the solo. We gonna do this here. Hold up the flower. I'm like, really doing this whole thing, or like doing like. Remember back in the day, there were really saucy talk shows. Remember like Jerry Springer and all that stuff? So we were like reenacting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So real dramatic material.
Really bad, like really bad. And I think we understood more, but we like PG-ified it for my parents and stuff. So it'd be like, oh, I think she's your brother, when we knew it was like, he's the father, like that kind of thing. But yeah, so when I look back at it, I'm like, I guess maybe, but I didn't think of it as a practical. I mean, it's not a job that you do, right?
Totally.
Like everyone in my family, they're in medicine, nurses, now doctors, but at the time, just like nurses and teachers and, just working class people. My mom was the first to like go to college, like that whole thing. So it was just exciting to be able to go to a great school. And then in high school, I ended up going to a performing arts school. And that's kind of where I was like, but honestly, just went there because it was a better school than the other schools that were options. You know what I mean? It was like, this is a nicer school. So why don't we try to get in here? What are we going to do? We're going to sing, we're going to dance. Maybe we'll do a monologue. If I did a monologue. And then it sort of worked out. And so I think I have, angels or something working to keep me on course when I'm like, I'm going to be a journalist, or maybe I'll work in international relations. And they're like, no, you're going to act.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was around high school that you realized that this could be a professional career. And then
but even then it was like, okay, some people do this, but
it's still just for fun.
It's for fun. And also like, who am I? Like, no one's going to want to watch me. You know what I mean? Like, doing a play in school and then seeing also people come back. And I just thought maybe it'll be something I'll do. Like I'll do like some theater in my neighborhood, or like start like do some sort of creative, and I was also really interested in writing like poetry and all this stuff. Cool. So yeah, but I think at my final year in high school, one of my teachers was like, you should think about auditioning for, like Carnegie, NYU and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm also going to apply to like, Temple and a Carnegie for other things,
Gotcha.
But one of my teachers really pushed me and was like, you should just go for it. Like, you love doing this. Just who cares about being practical? You're only this age once. Apply to everything if you can. So I got an extra job. We actually raised money and stuff too. So that, because the applications are like $100 a pop, right?
Yeah, totally.
That's expensive,
It's hard. Yeah.
So I did that. And then when I got into Juilliard, and I got into some other schools too, but I was like, that's pretty, I was like, okay, we'll just try this and see what happens. And then,
sure.
And there I was like, oh, people really do this. Okay. Like, how do you make a living? How do you, So.
Exactly. Because once you're surrounded by people taking it that seriously, you can't help but be like, from what I've heard, it's the most intense thing ever. And you don't even have an opportunity to
I actually underestimated how seriously I was taking it too.
Interesting.
Before, like, I got there and I was like, I was doing all the stuff and I was like, I'm really into this.
True.
Huh. And all
I
my
guess you would
teachers are
know
like,
right away if you weren't interested.
Oh, yeah. With the hours and everything. But that place really prepares you for the endurance that actually doing this requires.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. And so then the goal was it film and TV? I know you've done theater as well.
The goal was just to be working, man. To be honest,
Sure.
I didn't think I was going to be working in film and TV just because, I don't know, maybe I had like some kind of body dysmorphia or like a complex or something. I was just like, I'm weird looking. I'm like quirky. I don't know what's going to happen. And the standards for like what someone's supposed to look like in the 90s were like, it was like very specifically like, very Abercrombie, you know what I mean? It was like a very particular look you saw on TV, especially in the 90s, specifically with people of color. They like look a very particular way, women.
Oh yeah.
So I just didn't see it. So, but then I ended up getting a job and, again, I'm even as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm kind of realizing like I didn't see it. I just kept following doing what felt right to me, just keep doing. I'm going to do what feels right. I'm going to also, give it 100%. But I was honestly auditioning for plays of the public and, at a bunch of different theaters in the city. And, then I just happened to get in the film, and it's just like, you just kind of run with that. But at the same time, I also did I have done some plays and a lot of workshops and readings and things like that, even in between shooting movies.
All of which helps develop you as an artist, of course. The point is just to work.
Yeah, just to be working and meeting people and trying new things, because also sometimes the camera is so literal, like what you are in this little, box. It's like on stage, you can maybe do more of a transformation or play something way younger or way older. You can, you get to use your voice and your body in a different way, which is exciting for me. I really love physical theater and all those sorts of things. So sometimes when I'm even on set, people are like, can you like stay on your mark? Like, I'm like, too much. Slow down. Yeah. Yeah.
That's actually really beautiful advice. This idea of like, it's both going with the flow and following opportunities, but never giving it anything less than 100%. Like, yeah, the opportunities come, you say, sure, but then you are all in on that job.
Yeah. And I don't think it's like, sure. I mean, I think people around me, again, I don't watch myself, but people around me are like, girl, you were busting your ass. You were working hard. You memorized, like, and I was like, oh, but I just think that's just being present and 100%, you know what I mean? Like doing what you're supposed to do.
And work ethic.
Yeah. But not necessarily feeling like entitled or that anything is going to come my way necessarily. Just gotta, and I also love it. I think, that's kind of the big advice too. Like, do you enjoy it? Why are you doing this? Like, absolutely. If you enjoy it, then spending a few hours working on a monologue or, whatever your material and all that kind of stuff isn't like a pain in the neck, especially starting out. Yeah.
Especially starting out. Right. And it's been talked about on this podcast a lot, this idea of like almost what you're saying is like a mix of idealistic optimism and realistic. Like, did you know early in your career just how unlikely success as an actor is, and like
absolutely
how much rejection I'm assuming you faced your share of rejections?
Yeah. I mean, I also kind of like study. The thing about it is like, I didn't see myself, but I like studied other people's careers. Like when I was in conservatory, I would go to the Lincoln Center Theater, and they have like this amazing library of plays and you know it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we were just talking about that. Aldous Hodge was just talking about watching old Broadway shows.
Me too.
I've done that too.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Aldous. That's awesome. Shout out to him. I watched like from Lisa Gay Hamilton to, Meryl Streep to Viola Davis, Jeffrey Wright, John Cheadle. I've watched so many of those shows. And, also people have their memoirs and you study people's careers and you're like, how come they didn't get this? And where they got that? So I was kind of fascinated in that, aside from even being an actor, just fascinated by like all the things. And I love going to see a good performance and love seeing a great movie. So I think I knew, you just hear people talking and they're like, look, man, it's 90% rejection, 10% yes.
Yep.
And I always kind of knew that. And then I was also like, on top of that, I'm a woman and I'm Black. So it's going to be a doozy out here, but it's a part of it. And if you're someone whose ego is like really, I don't know, because I know some actors who are successful have like very sensitive egos and it drives them more. So I'm not going to say that, but for me, I think you have to just enjoy what you're doing. And then, sometimes if you really want something, it still burns a little bit, but then you just got to keep it moving. Totally. Yeah, I think it takes a lot of like resilience and bravery, and also just having a good support system at home, have some hobbies and things like that. Yeah.
That's important too. That's all great advice. Without like completely psychoanalyzing you too much.
Oh, okay, cool.
You mentioned the body dysmorphia. And of course, I do think that especially for screen roles, and of course we can get into it with like the scarcity of roles for people who look like you and such. But this idea of almost the imposter syndrome, like you said, do people want to see me? Like, I don't know whether I belong or deserve. Does that ever go away? Like, people have talked before about the idea of constantly feeling like I'm going to be found out as being untalented. It just feels like that's part of the artistic lifestyle.
I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I also think like Marilyn Monroe was like, she had sponsors. I mean, there's all kinds of people. I think whenever you complete a job, you're like, we're freelance kind of, you know what I mean? So it's like you complete it and then it's like, well, what's next? Is it going to be right for me? Are they going to see me for it? Does it make sense? So all that's going to happen. Is there going to be something that fits, or something, not just what I did last time, something that's different, that's challenging, that's fun, like all of those things. So, I think it's a constant journey and there's always fluctuations. And also you just change in life, right? You age, your thoughts change, the way you want to work, all different kind of things are sort of happening through this process. And then the world's changing, as we know. That's why we're doing this way.
Yes,
so,
true.
It's like all of those things are the bowls and the balls that we're like juggling, trying to figure this thing out. I think, I also think even outside of this business and the times that we live in with social media and all the photos and all that stuff, it's just par for the course in life to be sort of hyper aware of what you're presenting. I actually kind of feel like there's, for me, I don't know why, doesn't make any sense. People are going to be like, that's your problem. But I think for me, it's actually kind of freeing to be able to do it in front of a camera, to be for example, in Juneteenth, I played a character that didn't wear like a makeup and didn't have time to preen and primp and all that kind of stuff. And at first it was like, oh, I don't know. But then after a while, it's like, it's freeing. And you're like, oh, so that's out there is what it is. That's me. Next. You know what I mean? Like you've shown the things that people sort of hide in a way under the auspices of character and all that good stuff. So
I love that. Yeah. Once you are brave enough to really go there, it's easy to be there. It's like riding. Is it a muscle that you have to work? This idea of being vulnerable enough to just give yourself over to the character and then not feel self-conscious, not have your
maybe. And I don't know if self-consciousness. I mean, I think we get lucky when we have those moments where the self-consciousness really goes. It's not always there. Sometimes you're using your craft or your skill, and sometimes you're in the zone, but hopefully the audience, just like if you watch a musical performance, hopefully you can't tell the difference. Your favorite musician will get up and you'll be like, oh, it's so great. And you talk to them backstage and they're like, oh my God. And they're like, oh, I was off tonight. And you're like, I know, it was great. Totally. I enjoyed it. So that's what you hope for, that it can be a combination of all the things and you have a strong enough foundation to be able to do your work, even if you are self-conscious or any of that other stuff comes up. And then also you can give it to the character, which is fun. Like you have any issues, you can just give it to the character.
You mean use it. If you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling this, that, and the other, maybe your character's feeling that way.
Yeah, why not? Or try it. I mean, if your director's like, well, if it's completely left field, then, maybe you got to do some work to feel more relaxed. But if you can, why not?
Sure. So going off of that idea, the skill, the technique, I'd love to ask you about process. Are there things you do every time? I love this idea that to the extent that you are trying to graph or, carve your path through the biz, you want to play a role that is different from your last.
Mm-hmm. I think we would like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So are there things you do every time? You have played such different characters and worked with
What do you mean things
products.
I do every time? You mean like in my process?
Yeah. In terms of preparation and.
No, the only thing I do every time is read the script.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, totally.
That's all I got. No, it really does change every time. Yeah. I mean, I know we have a lot of different tools, but I actually find that I do better when it's route, when I have very little time to prepare. Like if it's one of those they're doing this and I don't know, someone dropped out or you got to go there in a week or something crazy. Mm-hmm. Then, you go to your school, your book of tools, okay, minimum, these are the things I have to do. But I actually think it's better when it's not that way. I sort of enjoy the journey of, okay, so what does this require? How am I, what's my proximity to the character naturally? And, all that kind of stuff plays into it.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does everything you just said also apply to auditions, or auditions a different category?
Oh my God. I just had a bad audition too. So this is good. This is good for the people.
We would actually love to hear about it.
Yeah. I mean, it had been a while, and I'd never, I've done self-tapes for the last few years for things, but this was my first Zoom audition ever.
Yeah. That's so hard.
Oh, it's so weird. And then I don't have my computer, so I was doing it on the phone. It's this tiny thing. I'm acting with the cast member. It was very strange. And then they were like, I was talking before, it's like, you got to stay in the frame. So like, this is it. Sure. You gotta, they can't see. And then you also like, how close am I? It's not the same as when you do a self tape. So it was a little, it was interesting. To say the least.
And it didn't, did it
go
well?
It was interesting, dude. I don't know. I got good feedback, but I think, I'm glad that was the first one, okay. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, now I've done this. We have to sort of adapt as things change. I still prefer, and don't see why self-taping isn't, it's just more grounding. Then, you hop on a Zoom, everyone's there, but we're all in a portal and you're kind of acting on this thing. It's just a little bit strange. But you were asking about for auditions, if the process is different. I don't know.
Because that thing of like, I read the script every time. Sometimes you don't get the whole script, of course. That's
true. I do like to ask for information. As much information.
Before,
if possible. And sometimes people don't have it, but especially if there's no script, I like to ask for information from, ask my agent if casting knows anything, has any notes, or what they want to see in each scene, like kind of what the energy is. I don't know. Auditioning is such a strange thing. And I find that I have seasons, like I have moments where I'm like really into it. It's not even about the actual material sometimes. It's just like, I'm in the auditioning mood, like, woohoo. And other times I'm just like, I don't want to go door to door. I'm not feeling, you feel like a salesman,
It kind of is. Yeah.
like here are my goods. You open up your kit of knives, selling your knives door to door. Yeah.
God, I've never heard auditioning put that way, but it totally is. You have to be a salesman. You have to be like a marketing person.
Yeah, I mean, not like in a cheesy, weird way though, right? But you are ultimately coming into a space and being like, this is what I have to offer.
Exactly.
Anybody buying? Anybody buying?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think too, like, I don't know. I'm actually, and this is actually what I enjoy about this job is like, sometimes I wonder, how much of it is you just do your own thing and how much of it is like trying to anticipate what they want, So that's interesting. Yeah. It's different than how it was when I first came out, where you like went into a room, you walked in, you're like, hey, this is me. That's you. And you do your thing. It's very different.
That is so different. Yeah. Do you have tips? Do you have self-tape practical advice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just, breathe, like actually breathe.
Oh,
like maybe even stop yourself and like just take a breath, an audible breath during your actual audition. It's actually very interesting. I watched, I was one thing I noticed is Meryl Streep breathes a lot. She's working, she's like, I was like, so funny. A lot of people don't do that, to like take up that much space. So breathing is cool. And don't be afraid of your like own face. Like you have to sort of enjoy your own face and watch it and critique it before you send it.
Yeah. Do you do that also with trusted friends or collaborators who can tell you almost like they're a director telling you this works and this doesn't? No, it's just you.
No, I have someone maybe read with me or something, but no, I'm not gonna, because I also think people getting in your head, sometimes people see you a particular way. You might have extra, there might be extra shit in there they don't know about. I don't know if you can curse on this thing. There might be extra things in there that people don't know about. And they're like, oh, that feels, that was kind of weird. It's like, well, maybe that was your intention,
Sure.
or,
totally.
But yeah, like check out your frame and everything that you're writing and make sure they can see your eyes, you know.
These are great tips. See your eyes and breathe. And yeah, just stay in frame. It is such a new, weird format that every actor has to figure out these days. So,
I mean, I feel like everyone has mastered the self-tapes though. I think the Zoom thing is like, wow.
Yeah. Totally.
As you're rolling your eyes right now, like, yes, I'm sick of this.
Yeah, here we are. I'm dying to do this in person again. I know. This idea of asking for information about a role. Can I ask you about backstory and this idea of like creating a character? Sometimes a character has an extensive backstory and it's right there in the script. And sometimes is it safe to say it's up to you and you are either creating it yourself in your own head or you're creating it with the writer director and it always ends up subtext and never text.
Yeah, that's so well said. Like beautiful. I don't even know what to add to that because that's exactly that. And that's why when you asked about process, it's like it's different because you can read something where it's like every inch of that person's life is in the script or in some information, or the writer and director really care about. Okay, she came from here. They've been together for this many years. And then sometimes you get a part where you're like, so how long are they married? And everyone's like, we don't know. Just do the scene. And you're like, oh, okay. I got to do that myself. Right. You know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I enjoy both of them. And also I think there are some actors I know, they might be lying. I don't know. But there are people who don't necessarily always do all that stuff. Like I've worked with some people and I'm like, so what do you think about this? And they're like, And I'm like, okay. So that doesn't, so everyone's mind and body works differently. Some people don't need that to be able to step into the character or the fiction, you know, to create a different reality, which is kind of funky. But I actually am somebody who likes to build all that stuff and kind of know as much as I can.
Sure. Well, and it sounds like their Miss Juneteenth is sort of the perfect opportunity to talk about that. Because is it safe to say that more aired on the side of like, there was lots of backstory available because it was so specific. I mean, this is culturally, regionally specific stuff. So you must have had lots to learn and incorporate into the character, as well as possibly some stuff you had to make up in the backstory.
Yeah, I mean the environment and the actual pageant and all that kind of stuff were an amazing world to step into. So I didn't have to create that. But as far as like her life and you know, like the intricacies of relationship and marriage and her mother and like even some people who watch the story are like, what was happening with there? So even when I read it, there were a lot of I'm not going to say holes, but a lot of places where I had artistic license to sort of do what I wanted to do, which is actually nice because it's kind of a blend. Like you said, it's a little bit of a blend. But yeah, it was so specific. Our director and writer, Channing Godfrey Peoples, woman from Texas, you know, this is her love story and to her city. And, you know, she wrote it about this pageant that she had attended called the Miss Juneteenth pageant since she was a kid and had like been greatly inspired by the women and just by the history and, you know, wanted to depict the people that she grew up with and that have been supporting her. And they were tremendously supportive when we were there. I've moved around all my life. I've never really experienced, you know, kind of like you, like born and raised, homegrown in one place kind of thing where it's like everyone knows who you are and they're excited. And they were excited about her movie, like her first feature, you know? So people were there bringing food and playing parts and all kind of stuff. So that was really amazing. And of course, like you said, that fills in information about, I don't have to I'm not on a lot somewhere in LA creating this like energy around me. That was just there. But, you know, who she was, I was lucky to be able to sort of build that also from observation and people that I was seeing, but also, you know, people that I knew and things that had nothing to do with the script in Texas.
Sure. And how much of it has to go back to what you mentioned earlier about the idea of like theater or physicality? Do you think about outside in? Did you think about, you also mentioned this character doesn't wear any makeup. So that also informs the character, right?
Yeah, outside in.
Because it's also what you're saying also is, of course, you immersed yourself in this culture and you were surrounded by it. So in some ways, you didn't have to work so hard to convey that culture. But were there things that like maybe you were bringing a New York City energy or like a Florida energy that didn't match this Texan culture?
Interesting. I mean, I think that happens. Yeah. I think that happens in the preparation. And I did go down about, I want to say maybe it was like 2 weeks before. And I already had tapes. I had requested, like I said, information. I requested tapes for the dialect, to listen to when I was in, because I was in New York. Mm-hmm. So I asked for, someone who's kind of what they're looking for. And Texas has a lot of different variations on their dialects and on their, what some people call them accents, right? So wanted to be specific about that particular area, part of Texas. And then also the social economic, like there's a whole bunch of different factors in how people speak, right? So did that. And then when I got down there, it was just watching and being like, hey, can I go work at the bar? Can I, and I had already done basically my homework. I just wanted to observe. And the goal was to like, not blend in and disappear because I got to lead this movie, right? But to not stand out, to not stand out and to sort of fit into the environment. So yeah, it's funny because one of my girlfriends was like, I watched, I guess 42, which was a movie I did about Jackie Robinson with Chadwick Boseman. Mm-hmm. It was on TV, I guess, this past weekend. And she was like, I just saw you in 42. She was like, that is a completely different person. And look, she was like, it's so different, Nikki. And I was like, it's so funny because I don't go into it. I think when you're just in it. You're like, this is what I'm exploring. Mm-hmm. But no, I don't think anyone was like, you feel like a New Yorker. It's like, no, I'm in Texas now. Yeah. See how they do. And then I was really lucky to be working with my two co-leads, Kendrick Sampson, who played Ronnie, who's amazing. And Alexis Chikese, who plays Kai, my daughter. Yeah. They're actually from Texas. He's from Houston and she's from, I think, Fort Worth, but maybe not right there, like a little bit further out, maybe like an hour away because she was doing an hour's drive in and out. But they sort of, they provided some of that too. And gotcha. Yeah. Do you ever discuss the backstory stuff with co-stars? Mm-hmm. I like to. Relationship? Yeah. Because that, of course, really comes through with the mother and daughter dynamic in particular. There are stairs in this movie that convey hundreds of pages of dialogue. Oh, that's so kind of you. Honestly, Alexis and I, what's funny is that Alexis and I didn't get the opportunity because she came in at the very last minute to do a lot of that work. But it was a matter of just trust. And I sometimes would teach like little classes and do, community service work, doing like kids theater and stuff. So I'd sort of enjoy working with young actors or people expressing themselves. And it was her first movie. And I just wanted her to win, so part of that is very similar to what Turquoise wants for her daughter. Yeah. So I think some of that just kind of bled over into like, I want you to do well and let's just really be present because we didn't have a lot of time. And so that's the other thing. I guess that's the other thing about auditions, I would say, is like, if you don't have a lot of time, the best thing you can give anybody on the planet is your presence, full presence, that being in the moment rather than, you don't have time or like you said earlier, if you don't want to be the type of actor to create all the backstory, just be in the moment. Yeah. And some of those people are so interesting. Like they're like, I'm thinking there are some actors I've been like, hey, you went in, and they're like, I don't know. Let's see how it goes. And you're like, shit. And then they're really good. And you're like, oh man, it's magic. Yeah, that's that thing. But then I'm also, but then sometimes you talk to them more and they're like, well, they got married 7 years ago. And you're like, I know you did some homework. Over here trying it's to so act. Ingrained in them, they just know, deep down. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. So what did you learn about, I love asking, like, what did you learn about yourself and about yourself as an actor from this project? Because, I mean, especially for this, it's such a
character study. And you mentioned this idea of creating characters depending on how much they have in relation to you. Like how similar are you to Turquoise or different?
I don't feel like I'm similar, but I've seen women. I mean, it's sort of like, I feel like Turquoise is a collage of people. I feel like Channing and I collaborated on a collage. Person, like she gave me some people she thought, and I used some little bits and pieces from, like mannerisms. But what did I learn about myself as an actor? I learned that I could persevere. I actually sprained my ankle like the end of the first week, because we were shooting in this really rusty little house, and one of the floorboards went out on me, and on a few of us actually, but I ended up spraining my ankle, which is why I have on those cowboy boots. It's actually not no way, not a fashion choice. It's to hide the wrapping that I had on my ankle. Wow. And that you can make something like that sort of work in your favor. So it changed my walk a little bit and changed my pace a little bit. Wow. Yeah.
That is just the life of the actor. Like you have to roll with it, but also use it creatively, like incorporate it into the character. Like
she walked a little bit more on one side and had like a little, it's like a energy. It wasn't like a switch, and it was really a way for me to seem upright and not like, because the minute it was like action, cut, I was like, give me my cane or whatever.
Ouch.
So yeah. So, but when I see it, I'm like, oh, that actually works. And it's kind of, you worked into the character. So
yeah, I love this idea of like, I guess it's the magic of film, but when you see yourself, I love the idea that you're like, that is not me at all. That is a real transformation. And it's not like you were trying to do that outside in.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you can see yourself. Sometimes but like, it's weird because sometimes you remember the day. Like, even if it's years ago, you're like, oh, I remember that day when it was raining. Like I had to do, I think for Valentine's Day, somebody sent me Shame. And they were like, I love this moment. And I was like, oh, I remember it was raining. It was so cold outside. Like me, I see it and I'm like, it was freezing out that day. And those shoes. And so, it's like when you see a photograph of yourself, right? You kind of remember the times. So, but it's also such a privilege to like, oh, look, I'm getting a little bit like I'm feeling it. It's such a privilege to be able to look back on like a decade almost and some change of like stuff and see myself when I was in my 20s and everything and be like, oh, wow, that's what you look like. Oh, look at you over there trying to act.
I was going to say that's beautiful. I mean, do you watch old performances and go, oh, I can learn from this?
I don't. It's like other people will like say something. I'm not back at home like, you know what? I think I'm going to watch.
I'm going to watch Shame.
I'm going to watch my old work. Yeah, I think, oh my God. No, that's not happening. But like, somebody will say something or like I'll see a meme or a clip or something, or, even for these interviews and stuff, people will send things and be like, can you, we're going to talk about this. And I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think that this is all really, thank you so much, Nicole, because this is all really capturing the essence of what it means to be an actor. And like, some of it is indescribable. Like some of it is intangible, I feel like.
Absolutely.
And other things are more concrete that you can point to. This is my technique. This is my character, etc.
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, we talked about rejection. There are really rough times. Like for anything that's great, there are some low lows, but there are some high highs, And I think one of the big things is like finding what balances you and grounds you. When there are lean periods, lean as in maybe not as much work, how are you being creative and all that kind of stuff. But then also while you're working, like sometimes working can be hard, or you might get something and they're like, well, we want it this way. You're in service to the project, to the creators of the project, right? So you got to do it that way, even if you don't feel it that way and everything. You got to figure those things out, and then it lives forever. So you got to like be cool with that and have a good sense of humor. Those are all of those like intangible things like you're talking about. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just inevitable that you're going to have dry spells. You're going to have those lean periods.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes by choice even. You know?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. You know, sometimes just like, I need a break. All right.
So, because we've been asking people recently in the last year or so, I would say, just about the state of the industry. And without getting into too many details, I know you've talked before about, I'm thinking of the fact that you were one of the only Black female leads in network television at one point, and had some inequities in the way you were treated in that job. And I'm wondering if you could comment on, we're at such a period of flux. It's such a period of flux for the industry.
Right.
And I'm hoping in a good way. I'm hoping we can be optimistic about it. I don't know. But where do you see us going? Like, what do you see has changed since your time at Sleepy Hollow? And
I'm so optimistic, man. There have been so many changes. I mean, when I was on that show, it was before the Me Too movement. It was before the sort of reckoning. It was before Oscar So White, all those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like all these conversations have happened since then where people are just becoming more aware of like, oh, yeah, maybe that is problematic if there are no people behind the camera, or, you know, if we don't have the right shade of makeup, or all those kind of little things that back then, if you made a comment about those things, you were sort of just being an asshole. And actually it makes sense, you know, and now it's just it's common knowledge. I've done a few jobs in the last few years where we start, before you start the project, you have the sexual harassment and inclusion meetings, diversity meetings. You have conversations about what's okay and not okay. And I think it makes a big difference in the workplace. It does. Yeah. And then also seeing more people. So I feel like, you know, and again, it was a while ago, you know, it was not like a decade ago, but it was a while ago, enough time where so much has happened so rapidly, even down to just this past year, how much has happened. So I'm very optimistic. And, you know, sometimes you end up with a few scratches and bruises, you know, but when you're on an adventure in your life and you're ready for it, then that is what it is. You know, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but I wouldn't change it. I like who I am. I like, you know, what I've learned in this period and sort of all the grounding that's happened for me. It's colorful, you know, life is colorful. But yeah, I actually am optimistic. And I'm also seeing a lot of, because of streaming, again, the world's done some crazy things where we're inside. And once upon a time, it was like, oh, these big movies and certain people couldn't get cast. And now with streaming, it's like, it's really made it more of a democratic thing, you know, or even social media, like people who weren't the gatekeepers, you know, choices, create their own material, and then they become super popular. And it's like, you cannot deny how wonderful this work is. And they end up with their own shows or starting their own you know, all these different things. And I think that's beautiful. There's just so much, to be done, but there's so much movement from then to now.
It's true.
Yeah. And I'm excited that I was a part of it, and I got to see some things that hopefully other people don't have to see.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you absolutely were. I think of, partly just because I'm obsessed with Viola Davis, I think of the fact that when she became the first Black woman to win the Drama Actress Emmy, she shouted out you. You were among the people that she shouted out a lot of people. And like, who does that during like when they win? Like, oof, what like power, you know what I mean? To take your moment and to shout out other people. Wow. So what is the advice? What is the advice for early career actors, especially these days? Regarding weird things happening on set, or just period? Oh, I meant in general. But also, yes. I mean, in terms of navigating difficult situations that hopefully are less and less inevitable for actors to have to face. I mean, what's cool is now they have like people on set that you talk to for that. Yeah. That you can go to like anonymously and all that kind of stuff. It's just like, what?
What's the advice I have in general? You better really like doing this.
Yeah.
It's awesome though. Like, and working with so many different people. I don't know, what is the advice? Actually read books and plays and articles and get ideas from other people's lives.
Yeah, I love the memoir.
Some people have been very successful just being very close to themselves, you know? But that's, for me, I think, you know, you might see something and have like, be confused about something in a script or feel like it's difficult to get into that character. And then something you read in the Atlantic or something you read or you watched on Nickelodeon with your nephew, you're like, oh, it's that. It's the purple character. You know, just having a breadth of like information, sources other than, I've been asked a lot, like, what movies inspired your performance? And I was like, movies? It was people and like life and history. And you don't, I mean, sometimes people are like, the character is like this character from that or something like that. But
but it's more often that it's like 100 characters.
Yeah. I think
like
so.
100 different, or not just characters, 100 different data points is what you're saying. Like,
just like, you know, or it might just be one data point, but you have to take in enough source, you know, enough stuff to inspire you to have like I guess what I'm saying is people say this all the time, but like have a full well. Like don't just read scripts and just, you know, only watch the movies that you like made by the same people. Like watch some art house movies in the Criterion Collection, and then also watch like a really ridiculous comedy and by like a really popular comedy director, or or watch a movie from Portugal randomly and just see what you like about that, and like what the choices some of the actors make in a frame. How is that different? How is pace and tone different? All that stuff.
I love that. That's perfect. Yeah. That's great advice. I think especially these days when we tend to kind of get siloed in our specific tastes and not want to go beyond
the algorithm, baby. The algorithm.
No, we got to kind of fight the algorithm.
Oh my God. I've been traveling, and one of the things I love about traveling and staying in different homes on location is like when you sign into someone's Netflix or their Amazon or like on their smart computer, you're getting a completely different algorithm.
How fascinating.
So like, culturally, like movies that would never pop up on my algorithm, I'm like, look at this. I've never seen this in my life. What is this? It's so messed up that I don't have an option. And then you have to go and search. So I would add more things to my algorithm now. But it is interesting. We can live in our own little bubbles. So, you know, breaking out of that, I think probably makes you a better artist. But then again, the industry will, you know, again, you might end up still, you know, I'm 5'3", Black and a woman. So I'm going to get a lot of moms and a lot of like, it's just what it is. But at least you have other stuff. And why not? It probably enriches life anyway.
Sure. Enriches life. That's beautiful. Nicole, I have to let you go soon, but can I ask you some silly backstagey questions we ask everybody?
Yeah, let's do that for sure. I'm like, this is all so deep. Golly.
I know, it's getting heavy. We always ask for worst audition horror story, and you just mentioned the recent Zoom one, but do you have like a...
Worst audition horror story. Oh my goodness, worst audition horror story. What happened? Oh, let me think. So bad. Oh yeah.
We're always making people
I had an audition. I didn't understand the tone of it at all. Like, you read something and you're like, it's very lifted. And then I realized like it was actually very grounded and supernaturalistic, but I thought it was like lifted. So I did a read and everyone was kind of like, thank you. Nice to see you. And then it clicked when I got in the car. I was like, oh no. So I went back in and was like, hey, I feel like I need to. And they were just kind of like, they look, and I was like, suddenly there were tons of people in the waiting room. I was like, shit, man, I'm not going to get to... Golly, and it was burning up in me, but it was so bad because I could have done the thing, right? Like I could have done it. I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand what they were going for.
Yeah. And it literally clicked as I was leaving. And then I actually went back, so that's the horror story, is like going back and then being like, no, chick, you had your turn, go home. And I'm like, I gotta live with this forever. The failure. But
it's not necessarily the advice to go back in.
No, probably not. But you know what? I've heard stories about people going back in and getting the job, and like it's some huge, amazing project. So again, everyone in every situation is different, you know?
That's true. Yeah.
And that story could be different. I could have been like, and I went back in and they were like, okay, we have 2 minutes, and I killed it and I got it.
And
it didn't happen that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I hate that the car epiphany, because that is very much a thing. The hindsight is 2020, where you're suddenly like, that's what I was supposed to do.
It's like when you send an email or like you send some sort of text, right? You proofread it a gazillion times, and then mid send it, you're like, what is that? What is that? Spelled that wrong? There's no comma there. What
relatable.
happened? Yeah.
Very relatable. Do you have... What is we always ask, what is one performance that you think every actor should see, and why?
I don't know. There's so many great performances. I love so many people's work. I literally am going through like so many. I mean, so many people. There's, oh gosh, of course there's the Merrills, there's the Violas, there's the Jeffrey Wrights, there's, you know, Cillian Murphy, and I love what is that? Peaky Blinders. I'm obsessed with almost everyone in that. I don't know. I can't do this. I can't. It's too painful.
I know. Yeah. Well, gosh, thank you so much for all of this.
Thank you so much.
This is so lovely. And now it's time to hear from Christine McKenna-Torella, our Backstage casting insider. I will let her take it away.
Hi guys, Christine McKenna-Torella here. If you're listening to this episode in real time, as they say, it is the first week of March, which is the beginning of Women's History Month. And I really love that we're kicking it off with a wonderful actor like Nicole. Something I love about working with Backstage is that the company wants to uplift and empower diverse voices. And as a queer woman in this space, I personally and professionally want to keep pushing that conversation forward. So let's play a quick game. What do these movies have in common? Clueless, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Pariah, Promising Young Woman, Winter's Bone, Monsoon Wedding, Selma, Nomadland, and my favorite documentary of all time, Paris is Burning. What do they have in common? Well, first of all, I kind of give it away. Some of these are my favorite films. These movies continually make the best films lists, and they are all directed by women. Did you know that Kathryn Bigelow is the only woman to ever win an Academy Award for Best Director? And only 5 women have ever been nominated in the history of the ceremony? What is that about? Women account for 51% of moviegoers, so you'd think that the power would be reflected in the storytellers that make the movies themselves. And although things are getting better, progress is slow, and quite frankly, representation is dismal. Women made up just 21% of all directors, writers, producers, executive producers, editors, and cinematographers working on the top 100 grossing films of 2020. And of the top 250 grossing US films, the breakdown for women in each job of these films is as follows. Producers, 30%, editors, 22%, executive producers, 21%, directors, 18%, writers, 17%, cinematographers, 6%, and composers, 5%. So that means 80% of Hollywood's 250 top grossing films had female directors, 73% had no female writers, and 41% had no female executive producers. 2/3 of the top grossing films employed fewer than 5 women in major behind-the-scene roles. So what is going on here, right? So according to studies, the reason for this discrepancy is bias. While women tend to hire other women for their productions, men do not tend to hire women for their team. And the statistics support that view. So the statistics show that when there is one female director on the film, women made up for 53% of writers in that space. And by contrast, on films with male directors, women made up only 8% of writers. Similar discrepancies exist for editors and composers. It's not like female filmmakers aren't bankable. Look at the list that I give you above. Look at Patty Jenkins and the Wonder Woman series. I could go on. I could exhaust you. And if you aren't a female filmmaker or a female identifying filmmaker, I want to ask you to examine the types of stories you tell about women. The way you speak about the characters and have the characters speak, and how you describe them and how you cast them. Because it matters. We've included an article in the notes about 15 female directors you need to know. And in making this podcast today, I used an article called Female Directors Employed in 2020 Hollywood on Backstage for my stats. By highlighting some of these women's work and by talking about this today, I hope it opens up a world of possibilities to young girls. On to the casting highlights of the week. I'm delighted to inform you that the marvelous Mrs. Maisel is casting again this week for a variety of different types of actors for more featured work in New York. Details on the site. The Godfather of Harlem, Epix' series, is casting season 2. They have some roles up on the site at the moment. Again, that is a project filming in New York. Check it out. And finally, not to leave my friends out in the UK, there is a very cool-looking pilot called Armour that came on the site this morning from Decantalan Films, seeking a genderqueer or non-binary actor for the lead role in the piece, a triumphant story of freedom, queer self-acceptance, and a rallying cry for anyone who's ever felt alone or an outsider in society. I want to see that pilot when it gets made. Head over to Backstage.com for the details of the casting highlights I mentioned this week. But as always, there are hundreds more on the site for every region, for every type of actor and voiceover performer. That's all from me. Break a leg in your upcoming auditions and have a beautiful week.
In the Envelope is recorded at Lotus Productions and Hyperbolic Audio in New York City, and Soundbox LA, Mark Grouse Studios, and Buzzies in Los Angeles. Thanks as always to our producer extraordinaire, Jamie Muffett, and to the team at Backstage, Samantha Sherlock, Mark Stinson, Caitlin Watkins, and of course, Casey Howe. Visit Backstage.com, and don't forget, you can subscribe to Backstage by using the code ENVELOPE at checkout for a free trial. That's right, 100% free. For more exclusive content, join us on Facebook and Twitter at In The Envelope, and subscribe, share, and leave a comment. Who would you like us to interview next? Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time for another glimpse in the envelope.